Yo mama, tell her go and vote for Obama. Yo mama, tell her go and vote for Obama. You can catch the train or you can catch the bus. It doesn't even matter, just get up off your butt. Yo mama, tell her go and vote for Obama. Yo mama, tell her go and vote for Obama. You can catch the train or you can catch the bus. It doesn't even matter, just get up off your butt. Yo mama, tell her go and vote for Obama. The first black president known as the one who called Osama. Stand up for women's rights, shutting down all the drama. Born in USA, Hawaii, but vacating the Bahamas. Call him Big Pen, can find him signing big bills. Stop animation at the door, that's when it gets real. He signed a tax relief in 2010. Created Obamacare, let's re-elect him again. He offers equal opportunity and equal rights. So go out and vote like it depended on your life.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Contrary to the rumors that you've heard, I was not born in a manger. I was actually born on Krypton and sent here to save the planet Earth. We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set.
Everybody somewhere between the ages of 18 and 25 will serve 3 months of basic training.
We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong. Yes, we can.
Obama's healthcare plan will include coverage of all essential medical services.
Yes, we can.
Obama is a cruel hoax. He works for Wall Street. He's an agent of finance capital.
Where did you come up with the number $700 billion? Here's the Treasury spokeswoman's quote. It's not based on any particular data point. We just really wanted to come up with a really big number.
To Democrats and Republicans who've opposed this plan, I say, step up to the plate.
A few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no.
Secretary Henry Paulson is no George Washington.
I don't think anyone questions, Mr. Kashkari, that you're working hard. Our question is who you're working for.
Obama pledged that he would resume the Security and Prosperity Partnership talks between Mexico and Canada that President Bush initiated.
The old boss is starting to look a lot like the new boss.
Robert Gates is going to remain on the job as defense secretary for at least a year.
Plenty of sources knew about this meeting, told us and others that it was at Hillary Clinton's house, but clearly it wasn't.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Barack is like the manager of Burger King. All presidents are, including Bush. It's like this: when your fries are cold, if your burger is not done right, you go back to Burger King, America, or your government, and you say, my burger's cold, I want new fries. First, you go to the cashier, that's the courts. You argue to the courts. The courts, if you can't get no justice with the cashier, you say, let me see the manager. I want to go to the Supreme Court. I want to see the president. The manager comes out. Hi, what can I do for you? Now the manager can override the decisions of the cashier, but you never get to see the franchise owner of Burger King. If you really have a problem with your burger, you need to go see the franchise owner. We need to go to the top or to the bottom. We need to go to where the real architecture of government is. And it's not in a president, it's in a global scheme.
Politics in America today is identical to pro wrestling. And what I mean by that is, in front of the cameras and the public, we all hate each other. I'm going to kick my opponent's butt. I'm going to whale him from here to high water and beat the crap out of him. Yet behind the scenes, we all are friends, going out to dinner.
Went to dinner together.
And it's all a work.
All intermarried. Show business.
It's showbiz. And that's what you have today in politics. The Democrats and Republicans aren't really opposed to each other.
Left and right mean nothing. The only thing that counts is, are you working for Wall Street or you're trying to defend the people against the financiers?
It's pretty obvious that there's some gigantic financial institutions that have been pulling the strings of politicians in this country for a long time. And just the fact that we have it set up where they can donate millions of dollars to these guys' funds, these guys' campaigns. I mean, how do we not expect it all to go bad?
America in 2009 was desperate for change. The past 8 years had been a disaster.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Maybe under here.
George W. Bush, who had claimed to be a conservative, had tripled the size of the federal government, shredded the Constitution, and destroyed the image of the United States worldwide.
Nope, no weapons over there.
Endless wars, over 1 million dead Iraqis, and more than 5,000 dead U.S. troops. The Patriot Act, warrantless domestic wiretapping and spying, the end of Posse Comitatus, the rise of the treasonous North American Union, a deepening recession sliding towards total economic collapse. These factors and other abuses had the American people in a state of panic for their future and the very existence of the United States. The elite were in trouble. The people were beginning to see through their facade, past their front man, and to the ruling elite behind the throne. For the first time in U.S. history, both parties were universally hated. Congress had a 9% approval rating. The globalist agenda had stalled. And then, onto the scene came a man who promised change. Change we could all believe in. Barack H. Obama promised to end the war and bring our troops home fast. He pledged to uphold the Constitution and to stop the federal government from spying on the American people. Candidate Obama told American workers that he was going to get them out of NAFTA and GATT. And he's already breaking those promises. In this film, we will prove that Obama says one thing and does another.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
Webster Griffin Tarpley is an accomplished geopolitical analyst and historian. Among his scholarly works are the unauthorized biographies of George Herbert Walker Bush and Barack Hussein Obama.
Since Bush, the elder, made his speech at the United Nations back in September of 1990 talking about the New World Order, I think I've become confused about what's actually going on in the world. The New World Order is a more palatable name for the Anglo-American world empire. It's the planetary domination of London, New York, Washington over the rest of the world. It's hard to get people to join that or think they have a part in it if you call it the Anglo-American world empire. If you call it the New World Order, then people in India or someplace like that or the European Union might think, well, there's something in that for us too. But that's not what it is. It's the Anglo-American New World Order. It's really the old world order. It's the British Empire morphing into the American Empire. The U.S.-British world empire is what you're going to get.
Combines of powerful men have always battled with each other over the levers of power. Gerald Celente is recognized as one of the world's foremost trends forecasters and is the founder of the Trends Research Institute.
People that are knowledgeable know that the fight that this country has been waging since its inception is for the central bankers not to take over the country. And that's why people like Andrew Jackson were elected. And that's why people revere people like Thomas Jefferson and others. The takeovers happened. and it's a corporate takeover.
Agents of the Bank of England attempted to assassinate President Andrew Jackson on multiple occasions because of his resistance against a private central bank being set up in the United States.
And it was something that Abraham Lincoln warned. And this is, by the way, why I believe he was assassinated. This is the Lincoln quote. "The money powers prey upon the nation in times of peace and conspire against it in times of adversity. It is more despotic than monarchy, more insolent than autocracy, more selfish than bureaucracy. I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. Corporations have been enthroned. An era of corruption will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until the wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. Wall Street has killed Main Street."
So I know how unpopular it is to be seen as helping banks right now, especially when everyone is suffering in part from their bad decisions. I promise you, I get it.
Again. As we track these new terror concerns at home and overseas, we are reminded of warnings we heard back in 2007. America was fighting the Iraq War. President Bush had just ordered U.S. troops to surge in Iraq, and critics were demanding that the U.S. withdraw the troops. When President Bush issued this frighteningly accurate, as it turns out, assessment of what would happen if we did that.
I know some in Washington would like us to start leaving Iraq now. To begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we are ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to Al-Qaeda. It'd mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
I'm the only major candidate who opposed this war from the beginning, and as president, I will end it. This is why, as president, I will make the fight against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban the top priority that it should be. Second, I will cut tens of billions of dollars in wasteful spending. That's why I've proposed an additional $1 billion in non-military assistance each year. I will cut investments in unproven missile defense systems. I will not weaponize space. I will slow our development of future combat systems. We need more troops, more helicopters, more satellites, more Predator drones in the Afghan border region. Now, I had no doubt, and I said at the time, when I opposed the surge, that given how wonderfully our troops perform, if we place 30,000 more troops in there, then we would see an improvement in the security situation and we would see a reduction in the violence. We can send 15,000 more troops, 20,000 more troops, 30,000 more troops. I don't know any expert on the region or any military officer that I've spoken to privately that believes that that is going to make a substantial difference on the situation. I've always said that the pace of withdrawal would be dictated by the safety and security of our troops and the need to maintain stability. That assessment has not changed. Tend to end this war. I have seen no information that contradicts the notion that we can bring our troops out safely at a pace of 1 to 2 brigades per month. And again, that pace translates into having our combat troops out in 16 months.
The military-industrial complex has taken over the country along with the Wall Street gang.
If you look also at the people that Obama has put on his appointments list, it's all Wall Street. It's government of Wall Street, by Wall Street, and for Wall Street. There's nobody from heavy industry. There's nobody from the auto sector, nobody from Silicon Valley, nobody from big oil, nobody from defense, no labor, no women, no retirees, no small business, nothing. It's pure Wall Street. The only people who have a voice in Obama's councils are Wall Street finance oligarchs. That's all there is. Nobody else counts for anything under Obama. It's the most extreme Wall Street administration we've ever had.
Before his death, President Woodrow Wilson apologized to the public, regretting that he had been deceived by a group of international bankers, and the country's financial system had fallen into their iron grip via the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
Whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
Dwight D. Eisenhower, he warned the people that the military-industrial complex was taking over the country.
Only 3 years after leaving office, President Eisenhower's prophetic warning concerning the threat posed to our system of government by the military-industrial complex came to pass. President John F. Kennedy had enraged the entire elite network.
Now, Kennedy was brought in as somebody who was expected to be a puppet. It was thought that his pro-Nazi father, Joseph P. Kennedy, the bootlegger, the speculator, would guarantee that Kennedy would be obedient to the establishment. They thought that Kennedy was a sex maniac who could be manipulated through all of this, but it turned out that through his personal suffering, Kennedy had discovered a personal sense of himself which went beyond just being a puppet, and he began to think about things like economic recovery, world peace, having a space program, making deals with the Soviets, cutting the Federal Reserve down to size, and a whole series of other things.
Executive Order number 11110, signed by President Kennedy, began the process of abolishing the private Federal Reserve. Kennedy was also pushing for real civil rights reform and had begun the process of pulling the troops out of Vietnam.
The last time you had an actual president was Kennedy.
The oligarchs took swift and decisive action. When John Kennedy attempted to take the government back from the robber barons, he was brutally murdered. The message to future U.S. presidents and leaders across the world was clear: do as you're told or die.
If they controlled it before, what makes you think they're not controlling it now? The country was on a verge of revolution. They threw a black man up. Now we like this.
They give him the money, they give him the bundling, they give him vote fraud, they give him the media whores, they give him goons, they even have elected officials making threats to put people in jail if they criticize Obama in public. All of this is the mark of a puppet, and that means that he is a puppet, actually more of a puppet than anybody else, more of a puppet than Mrs. Clinton would have been, even more of a puppet than McCain. He's the maximum puppet that we've had certainly since Jimmy Carter.
They put a black face on the New World Order, and now we all happy. KRS ain't buying it.
Of rap sensation Public Enemy, Professor Griff, gave us his view of the Obama phenomenon.
Barack Obama's been given a pass by the Blue Bloods. He's been given the okay by certain secret societies for them to let him in. I truly believe imperialism and fascism needs a facelift. And that facelift is going to have to be black. And the reason why I believe that, simply because I think they're trying to go into Africa. Well, they're already in Africa, but they want to totally control all the natural minerals that they're going to need to carry themselves into the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd centuries. You follow me? So I think they have to go through a phase of galvanizing the masses of dark-skinned people that truly believe that change needs to come, but the change that they're talking about is not necessarily change for the better as far as the masses of the people. It's probably a better change for them. It's not going to change for us, the little man on the totem pole. And no one looks at the agenda. As long as he positions himself right, have the right tie on, have the right smile, repeats the slogans over and over and drives it home, the average American is just going to swallow it hook, line, and sinker. And we don't even know what the agenda is.
He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
You must remember, dear people of America, that whenever government wants you to think and act in in a certain way that would bring justification to an action that they are already planning to make. They must make the person that they hate a boogeyman.
يعني يجاوبونا على السؤال اللي حاير، لماذا العراق؟ شو سبب له؟ بن لادن عراقي؟ ما هو عراقي، اللي هربوا نيويورك عراقيين؟ ما هم عراقيين. اللي هربوا البنتاغون عراقيين؟ ما هم عراقيين. في أسلحة دماغ شامل عند العراق وما عنده.
Dom has perfected the game of cheat and retreat and is very skilled in the art of denial and deception.
This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens on Saddam Hussein's orders.
This is a man who has attacked his neighbors twice, who represses his own people.
He used chemical weapons both against the Kurds and against the Iranians during the 1980s.
Who is continuing to develop weapons of mass destruction.
He's launched ballistic missiles against 4 of his neighbors over the years.
Who's tried to assassinate a former American president.
This is a man of great evil.
يد عربية بالكامل تقتل تشنق في المشانق راح نتفرج لماذا؟ وممكن الدور جاي عليكم كلكم. نعم. ليش امريكا قاتلت مع صدام حسين ضد الخميني؟ كان صديقها. تشيني كان صديق لصدام حسين. رامي سلي كان وزير الدفاع الامريكي لما كان يدمروا في العراق، صديق حميم لصدام حسين، واخيرا باعوه وشنقوه. حتى انتم اصدقاء امريكا، نحن اصدقاء امريكا، بلاش نقول انتم، نحن اصدقاء امريكا كلنا قد توافق امريكا على شنقنا في يوم.
Saddam Hussein is a homicidal dictator who is addicted to weapons of mass destruction. Intelligence sources indicate that Saddam Hussein has ordered that scientists who cooperate with UN inspectors in disarming Iraq will be killed along with their families.
One country.
What the CIA does is go into a country and move among the people that are dissatisfied to stimulate a revolt against a leader that they don't like because they want. Well, what about Libya? See, how much money is being spent to arm the so-called rebels? They're dissatisfied. Well, what is their dissatisfaction about? Do they have jobs? Yes. Do they have food? Yes. Has Gaddafi used the oil money to build Libya? Yes. Did Gaddafi use oil money and discover water under the Sahara Desert and brought that water to the surface and brought water from Benghazi all the way to the border almost of Tunisia? Did he impose farming in the desert so that they could feed their own people? Yes. Are there billions of dollars that he's spending building homes, building apartments for his people? Yes. So something is under this. And so when America, England, France, 3 imperialist powers want to destabilize that country, is it that you're so concerned? Now listen to this hypocrisy, American people. Is it that you're so concerned over the blood that is being shed in Libya when you look the other way when the Israeli Defense Force was bombing the innocent people of Gaza? Unarmed men, women, and children, but our government looked the other way? You looked the other way when the Israeli Defense Force went into Lebanon thinking that they were going to have an easy victory? Then you had to come out with your tail between your legs? Don't tell me, and wise black people or white people that you're interested in black suffering. Where were you in Rwanda? Where are you in the Congo? Why did you go to Darfur? Because oil is there. No, you don't want to save the Libyan people. That's your noble motive to hide your wicked agenda.
According to some, it's about protecting civilians.
And our resolve is clear. The people of Libya must be protected.
Others say it's about oil.
The only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You think we'd be in Iraq if the major export there was broccoli?
But some are convinced intervention in Libya is all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold, a true sharing of the wealth.
It's one of these things that you have to plan almost in secret, because as soon as you say you're going to change over from the dollar to the something else, you're going to be targeted. There were two conferences on this, one in 96 and another one in the year 2000, called the World Mataba Conference, organized by Gaddafi. And everybody was interested. I think most countries in Africa were keen.
Gaddafi didn't give up. In the months leading up to the military intervention, he called on African and Muslim nations to join together to create this new currency that would rival the dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks. So yes, that would certainly be something that would cause his immediate dismissal and the need for other reasons to be brought forth for removing him from power.
It's happened before. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraqi oil would be traded in euros, not dollars. Sanctions and an invasion followed. Some say because the Americans were desperate to prevent OPEC from transferring oil trading in all its member countries to the euro. A gold dinar would have had serious consequences for the world financial system, but may also have empowered the people of Africa, something black activists say the US wants to avoid at all costs.
The United States should welcome the self-determination of Africans. They certainly have denied self-determination to Africans inside the United States, so we're not surprised by anything that the United States would do to hinder self-determination of Africans on the continent.
The UK's gold is kept here in a secure vault somewhere in the depths of the Bank of England. As in most developed countries, there's not enough to go around. But that's not the case in places like Libya and many of the Gulf states. A gold dinar would have given oil-rich African and Middle Eastern countries the power to turn around to their energy-hungry customers and say, sorry, the price has gone up and we want gold. Some say the US and its NATO allies literally couldn't afford to let that happen.
Every one of his appointments are there to screw the American people. Every single one of his appointments are people who are working to bring down the Republic and the Constitution of this country.
People be so stupid and gullible to believe a bunch of political people.
So people who voted for Obama were trying to express, I think, first of all, something worthwhile. The hatred for Bush, Cheney, the neocons, the desire to punish the Republicans for their adventures, their police state, and their economic depression. The second question was on the economy. people felt that Bush was selling them down the river into a world depression. He is, of course, the new Herbert Hoover in that regard, so they were trying to get something different from that. The tragedy, of course, is, and this is really why Obama was groomed and prepared over a period of almost 30 years now, that Obama is there to frustrate and to deceive all of those hopes. Obama is a cruel hoax. He's a bogus sham. He's an absolute denial of everything that you'd expect from an American president.
It is very disturbing to see well-meaning people falling for high-tech propaganda over and over again. It happened after 9/11. The American people en masse were swept into a mob psychology, irrationally throwing their common sense to the wind and doing whatever the administration told them to. The general public eventually caught on to the fact that George W. Bush was a deceitful thug and that the economy was in freefall. In the midst of it all, Barack Obama was there, speaking out against the abuse of the people at the hands of the establishment. With the election of Barack Obama, the world rejoiced that the United States was no longer in the hands of madmen. But unfortunately for humanity, this was another vicious fraud.
I want to like the guy. He speaks gently, he's intelligent, he seems to be a man of peace. He is just as charismatic as they come. But you know what? Is that a tree is really, really measured by the quality of its fruit. And when you kind of put away all the flowery words, when you put away all the rhetoric, when you put away all the rock and roll music, what he does is what's important for the people of this country, starting with the truth.
Don't tell me words don't matter. We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. And the way to make government accountable is make it transparent so that the American people can know exactly what decisions are being made, how they're being made, and whether their interests. Because when I'm president, meetings where laws are written will be more open to the public, no more secrecy. That's a commitment I make to you as president. I'll make our government open and transparent, so that anyone can ensure that our business is the people's business.
But these negotiations will be on C-SPAN. And so the public will be part of the conversation.
We're going to do all these negotiations on C-SPAN. So the American people will be able to watch these negotiations.
You know, I respect the fact that Senator Clinton and President Clinton attempted in '93 to get health care reform passed. But I do think that they did it in the wrong way, because it was behind closed doors and we did not enlist the American people in the process.
When there's a bill that ends up on my desk as president, you, the public, will have 5 days to look online and find out what's in it before I sign it, so that you know what your government's doing.
Let me say it as simply as I can. Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this president.
Since taking office, this has been the administration that's prosecuted more whistleblowers in 2 years than in the preceding 40 years. It meets with lobbyists across the street from the White House so they don't have to disclose they're meeting with lobbyists, and, this is true, censored nearly 200 pages of internal emails about their efforts to make government more transparent.
Obama received an award for transparency Monday.
That meeting was completely closed to members of the media.
They not only closed the meeting to the media, they didn't even put it on the president's public schedule.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
What are some of the positions that you held previously within the intelligence community?
I've been a systems engineer, systems administrator, senior advisor for the Central Intelligence Agency, solutions consultant, and a telecommunications information systems officer.
One of the things people are going to be most interested in trying to understand who you are and what you're thinking is there came some point in time when you crossed this line of thinking about being a whistleblower to making the choice to actually become a whistleblower. Walk people through that decision-making process.
When you're in positions of privileged access, like a systems administrator for these sort of intelligence community agencies, you're exposed to a lot more information on a broader scale than the average employee. And because of that, you see things that may be disturbing, but over the course of a normal person's career, you'd only see one or two of these instances. When you see everything, you see them on a more frequent basis. And you recognize that some of these things are actually abuses. And when you talk to people about them, in a place like this, where this is the normal state of business, people tend not to take them very seriously and move on from them. But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it. And the more you talk about it, the more you're ignored, the more you're told it's not a problem. Until eventually you realize that these things need to be determined by the public, not by somebody who is simply hired by the government.
Talk a little bit about how the American surveillance state actually functions. Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can, by any means possible, that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
One of the extraordinary parts about this episode is that usually whistleblowers do what they do anonymously and take steps to remain anonymous for as long as they can, which they hope often is forever. You, on the other hand, have decided to do the opposite, which is to declare yourself openly as the person behind these disclosures. Why did you choose to do that?
I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government. But I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these. I didn't modify the story. This is the truth. This is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this.
Have you given thought to what it is that the U.S. government's response to your conduct is in terms of what they might say about you, how they might try to depict you, what they might try to do to you?
Yeah, I could be, rendered by the CIA. I could have people come after me, or any of their third-party partners. They work closely with a number of other nations, or they could pay off the triads, or any of their agents or assets.
As Snowden explained more about the tens of thousands of documents, McCaskill listened carefully.
I was sort of warming to the idea that this guy was for real.
One of the first files they discussed was this one. It directed Verizon Business Services to turn customer phone records over to the NSA. The journalists were stunned.
What this document revealed is that the NSA surveillance system is not directed at very bad people or about terrorists. It's directed at the American citizenry and other citizenries around the world indiscriminately in bulk.
The document directly contradicted what Director of National Intelligence General James Clapper had said before Congress just a few months earlier.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
You can have all the intelligence data you want, but if it does not get to the right people, what good is it? What's a fusion center?
The idea is in a post-9/11 world, you need to have full spectrum and data sharing. So that means that local law enforcement is picking up all kinds of stuff over the course of their investigations, and also just things that come up in the course of their doing business, not necessarily with any criminal predicate. And then they bring that data together with people who work at the federal agencies. They sit next to people who work at the federal agencies.
It's an office for the FBI, and right next to it, Homeland Security. And across the hall, the only place in the building where secure information can be exchanged.
Federal, state, county, and city law enforcement agents are all gathered under one roof in what has become a model of intelligence sharing.
That's right, Neely. The Arkansas State Fusion Center is a central hub for police, first responders, and emergency management personnel to share information. But this week's training is designed to help local agencies collect intelligence in the fight against terrorism.
What happens next is one of the biggest changes in 10 years. Numerous state and federal agencies share this fusion center to exchange intelligence. This is an office for the FBI, and right next to it, Homeland Security.
Of the nation's 72 fusion centers are located in Florida.
Fusion centers, sounds awesome, right?
Those are centers that were created in the aftermath of 9/11 to correct failures in the sharing of intelligence and other information.
I want to introduce you to the men and women at the police department who we'll call the ultimate crime trackers in what they call the Fusion Center. And the trends they spot help officers solve crimes and fix traffic tie-ups that definitely impact your life.
The police department uses a number of high-tech methods to gather information from all around the city and to map it. It's a huge amount of records that eventually ends up in the Geographic Information System, or GIS. GIS plots the crime and tracks it. From violent crimes to vehicle burglaries, the information is layered where detectives can spot patterns and then draw out conclusions.
Vehicle burglaries, we have distinct hotspots. It's just like John Gerard when he does the weather forecast at night. He's tracking the storm as it blows through San Antonio. So what the hotspot measures really is frequency and proximity.
Detectives monitor walls in what's called the Fusion Center, full of flat-screen TVs showing a variety of information, including cameras, news channels, dispatch screens, and different intelligence sources. And when analysts and detectives spot a pattern, they determine which tactics to use to address that pattern of crime.
That shows us patterns where there's a lot of a specific type of crime being committed. It shows us when the crime is being committed, possibly who might be committing a crime.
There's misconceptions on what fusion centers are, and the misconceptions are that we are conducting spying operations on U.S. citizens, which is, of course, not the fact. That is absolutely not what we do. You can do something. Doesn't mean you should.
Ben Stone, executive director with the American Civil Liberties Union in Iowa, says his concern isn't so much with the main mission of fusion centers, but with how the information is gathered.
Department of Homeland Security spying on innocent Americans? Oh my goodness.
Is it a bad place or a good place? What the hell? Don't give me anything else to worry about.
I think it's a pretty bad place. For one, you have fusion centers in places that have never suffered a terrorist attack, that are very unlikely to suffer a terrorist attack, and quite honestly, the fusion center in those places probably wouldn't be able to prevent a terrorist attack anyway if one were to happen. So you have them in all of these states. A lot of it has to do with the money, the federal funding that comes, particularly from the Department of Homeland Security.
Up to $1 billion.
gives grants to places so that they can they get this money. Sometimes they use it for very strange purposes. I know of cases where terrorism funds have more or less been used to track livestock.
The director says Arkansas hasn't collected much information about international plots, but they do focus on domestic terrorism, and they are interested in several anti-government groups in the state.
No potential terrorist activity, none, and often spied on innocent Americans. But is it your understanding that there is absolutely no uprising to try and do something about this government behemoth of some 90,000 plus employees?
The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizure, and that the government or anyone can't just, stick their hands in your pockets and put a big magnifying glass over your house and see exactly what it is that you're doing.
No more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient.
30,000 Americans have been surveyed by the United States government.
I believe we need a new approach. I am therefore ordering a transition that will end the Section 215 bulk metadata program as it currently exists, and establish a mechanism that preserves the capabilities we need without the government holding this bulk metadata.
If you have a cell phone and you carry it on you and you transmit data across that, you're transmitting data in a public place. You should not think that it's unreasonable that we're just going to go ahead and watch you.
Users beware. The Federal Bureau of Investigation can now hear everything you're saying, even when your cell phone is turned off. Authorities can now activate the microphone inside your phone, allowing them to eavesdrop on you and your conversations. Experts say the only way around this is to take the battery out of the device.
Point in our society where we're allowing more and more of our daily lives to be watched through the eyes of a camera lens, from traffic lights to the security cameras in our office buildings and elevators to, the home nanny cams for our children and our pets. The private surveillance industry continues to grow. Our own cell phones these days have become more than just a way to communicate, but also a useful tool for law enforcement to weed out criminals. The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals recently ruled that Americans have no reasonable expectation of privacy when carrying cell phones, allowing police to track GPS signals without a warrant or probable cause. So why keep on paying? Why keep on paying to keep spying on ourselves if we know our own law enforcement can do it for free?
Here's that cell phone story you've been waiting for. Cell phone users beware, Big Brother may be listening. The Federal Bureau of Investigation can now hear everything you say, even when the cell phone is turned off. I know it sounds kind of out there, but using your phone's tracking device, authorities can now activate the microphone inside the dreaded thing, allowing them to eavesdrop on you and your conversations. Serious business, and the FBI used this form of surveillance to keep tabs on critical conversations by people they call known members of the mafia. Experts say the only way around it is to take the battery out of the thing.
Phone records, sometimes without warrants. Now, these surveillance requests are surging to a whopping 1.3 million last year alone. Now, we should mention these records are new, so there's not a lot of comparisons to be made. But that said, here's some context. AT&T alone says it's seen law enforcement requests more than double since 2007.
Before 9/11, before the Patriot Act, before the legislation that the federal government enacted after the Patriot Act that made it easier for the FBI to get their hands on our records without search warrants, the legal standard was the same everywhere in the country for local, state, and federal law enforcement. You wanted to listen to somebody's phone calls, or you wanted a record of their phone calls from the phone company, you went to a judge and you presented evidence that demonstrated to the judge that that person probably committed a crime, and that evidence for the crime was probably contained in the records you want. Because the Patriot Act let FBI agents and other federal agents write their own search warrants, bypassing federal judges, and a lot of local and state law enforcement sort of got jealous of that federal authority, and so they began peppering judges to lower the standards a little, say that we're not going to lessen the protections of the Constitution in order to make the police work a little bit easier. The police work harder, they'll save lives, they'll comply with the Constitution, They have
by 2016, we're expecting $26 billion, this industry alone. And within the last decade, more specifically the last 2 or 3 years, we saw this huge transition where telecom companies, places where...
You're talking like Verizon, Sprint.
Places where you're going to get cell phone contracts, landline contracts, broadband, cable, internet, all that stuff. Those companies have also, in the last couple of years, entered the home surveillance market, which is great because that's one, have everything streamlined to one bill. You don't have to worry about paying, ADT one thing and Time Warner another. No, you can have the same company that sends information over telephone wires and over fiber optic cables. Those same people can see exactly what's happening in your house, and they realize that they can make a ton of money by doing that, and they have been.
In terms of the secret court order, Verizon is required to hand over the location of the caller, location of the recipient, and the time and duration of all calls. The contents of the conversations are not covered. The order also says that Verizon is required on an ongoing daily basis to give the National Security Agency information on all telephone calls in its systems.
That no digital communication is secure, and so these communications will be found out. The conversation will be known.
Unmanned drones that can tase or shoot a person from the sky and can even launch a grenade. These are the latest toys the Houston, Texas SWAT team, the police department, purchased using its Homeland Security grant given to it by the federal government. Is this the next phase of the police state, where cops can play video games with our civil liberties and with our lives? Here with the frightening analysis is Lou Rockwell, Mises Institute founder and chair. Lou, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Judge, great to be with you.
Say it ain't so. Say that the police department of Houston does not have unmanned drones from the sky that can tase someone or kill them, as the military has been doing overseas.
No, it's true, and of course the federal government is, as you mentioned, supplying these things. They're all federal agents, various federal agencies have them. Undoubtedly the state police will have them, the local police. Maybe we can look forward to dogfights among all the Predator drones, but of course they also are developing X-rays that can see through the walls of your house. They can spy on you in your backyard while you're sunbathing. And as you say, they can taser you, shoot a baton into your head, or even kill you with a grenade. And we're supposed to feel safe about this. We're supposed to think this is to fight terrorism, when of course it actually is terrorism. Most of what we're told about terrorism is, I think, phony baloney. But of course the federal government is establishing a police state, cameras everywhere, on every light pole, reading our emails, listening to our phone calls, and now shoot you in your backyard if they don't like what you're doing. No trial, no jury, just boom.
Well, it starts with the federal government. The Patriot Act unleashed thousands of federal agents to write their own search warrants, to capture the keystrokes on our computers when we use them, to get our legal records, our telephone records, even our medical records. Now the federal government is going to give money to local police departments. I think you just made a very good point, Lou, and that is, if Houston has this, Dallas is going to want it. If Dallas has it, I'm just naming cities in Texas to start with, Austin's going to want it. If those 3 police departments are going to have it, the Texas Rangers, the name for their state police, are going to want it. And if Texas has it, can New York and California and Illinois and New Jersey be far behind?
Judge, just the existence of the SWAT teams, which are militarized, armored units, nothing like what local police used to be, are themselves a sign of the police state. And now they're going to have these drones. And it's not only the big cities. Every small town, every small city is going to have their drones. The federal government, among all the other wonderful things they're doing for us, giving us a depression and so forth, want to drone-ize the whole country, make us all vulnerable. Anytime they don't like what we're doing, boom. And, you've got nothing to say about it. Maybe you can bring a suit afterwards that they'll say is too secret to be examined, and you're out of court.
And much of this has happened without any popular vote. Decisions by bureaucrats and law enforcement started with the federal government. One hand the Patriot Act, and the other hand the president deciding to become judge, jury, and executioner on an American in a foreign country. He doesn't need a trial. We don't have time for a trial. The evidence of guilt is so overwhelming. We know their argument. What can we do about this, Lou Rockwell?
Well, of course, we also have to focus on the, what should we call it, the security industrial complex. I mean, the vast network of industries that are making so much money off these drones and all the rest of the police, the tanks that the local cops have and so forth. So I think we need to educate ourselves. How about reading your new book would be one thing people could do, or reading your previous book on the Patriot Act. We have to educate ourselves. We have to understand what our freedoms are, who our enemies are, and it's not some guy in Yemen. The enemy is in Washington, D.C., and in every other capital, state capital, local government office building. That's where the enemy is. Those are the people who want to take away our freedom, are taking away our freedoms, taking all our money, too.
It's the great debate that continues. We're talking about your privacy versus your protection. All new tonight at 6, a new tool police agencies can use to look directly through the walls of your home.
It's technology right out of science fiction.
Seems kind of like some movie technology or something like that, because I've never actually seen it in person.
But we're not living in Gotham City, and this technology is real. This handheld device called the Range R can see through walls. It's already in the hands of dozens of police departments across the country.
Out of the building, places it on a wall like a stud finder inside your home, and then sends a signal back to him. If it detects movement, it can tell how far away that movement is. Now, it doesn't show an image of what's actually happening inside. Now, this device is something that you're talking about online. Ginny writing, "This is an invasion of privacy." Kevin writing, "My fear is when criminals get a hold of these tools when casing houses." And really, that's one of the fears here. Also, Thamra writing, "Big Brother is watching you." Kind of scary when you think about what this device can do, folks. All right, there's Alien who says, illegal, illegal, illegal. And that's an important facet of this whole story, because we spoke with one of our sources who says that using this in Georgia without a warrant, just like our viewer said, illegal.
Remember the gesture-controlled computer screens in the sci-fi thriller Minority Report? Well, something like this could soon become a reality. Apple has been granted a patent for a 3D gesture control system. It uses a camera to track your hand movements, which could eventually control a TV. The technology could also be applied to the iPad or Mac computer.
Valhalla, this is Thor. We have visual on a possible high-value target.
Thor, this is Valhalla. We're seeking positive ID on target traveling in convoy, and we're pushing more assets your way. Contact Loki on secondary deck.
Loki, this is Thor. Target is located at grid coordinates 24 Tango, Kilo, Bravo, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 9er. Confirm you have visual. Verifying target ID. Electro-optic and infrared sensors are online.
Confirming target.
SecDef is arriving now.
Attempting cell phone link to moving target.
Stand by for data feed.
Stand by for audio.
Got it.
Now don't tell me you spotted a beard in the middle of a goddamn sandstorm. Is it really him?
We're confirming that now, sir.
Sir, audio's coming up now. Verifying voice pattern match.
What do we have here, Sergeant?
4 males. One of them speaking in a Rafshani dialect consistent with our intel on Al-Khohei.
Sir, it's just coming up.
37% probable don't belong in the same sentence. I'm not taking this to the president.
CIA and NCTC concur. It is the target, based on reliable intel from the Brits.
They're pulling off the highway.
Criteria is not met. Recommend abort.
We have an abort recommendation.
If it's him, this guy comes out of hiding every couple of years at best.
Sir, target is appearing around the northeast corner.
We've got AK-47s, RPGs, and shackle-guided missiles.
This is a training camp, Mr. Secretary.
Wait. Print, 51%.
51%. Abort rec still holds.
All other PID options exhausted. What do you suggest we do, sir? Is that a weapons cache?
Yes, sir. Replacement of the stones around the pit. Marker for the 5 pillars of Islam. I think it's a funeral.
Oh, for Christ's sake. Counsel, how many ways would this violate the Geneva Convention?
We can invoke order combat. There's no independent intel verifying that this is in fact a funeral.
Signal's got the president from Air Force One, sir. Mr. President, we have a 51% identity match on Majid Al-Kawi. The bad news is, there's some possibility he's at a funeral. You should also be aware we have an abort recommendation. But the Joint Chiefs are urging a go.
All right, what's your recommendation?
Sir, we measure success by the least amount of collateral damage. At 51% probability, the risk is too high.
And if it is Alcoy, and he walks, I'm putting our people at risk. You have a go.
Thank you, Mr. President.
We're weapons hot. We have weapons hot. You are cleared to engage.
We have handshake with the MQ-9 Reaper. Sending you images now.
Loki, target coordinates received.
Yes, sir. Switching to IR sensor. Target is Lays. Master arm on. Missiles away.
10 seconds to impact.
For journalists in this country, the realization that the government is spying on their communications is becoming more and more common. That's according to a new study from the Pew Research Center. It reports that nearly 7 in 10 journalists believe that the Obama administration has in fact spied on them. But where is the media pushback against all of this?
Article came from the Washington Examiner, which pulled information from the Pew Research Center. So it completed a study on how journalists were responding to reports that large numbers of investigative reporters especially had their communications hacked. So out of the 454 media figures that were polled, 64% believe that the U.S. government has probably collected data on them, not only from their phone calls, but their emails as well. Now, 13% of the journalists responding to this poll say spying or hacking problems led to them not reaching out to a source. 3% declined to pursue a particular story because of that, and 2% considered leaving investigative journalism altogether. More information on top of that. In the past 12 months alone, 49% of the respondents changed the way they store and share information. 29% changed the way they communicate with fellow reporters, editors, and producers.
The information's out there, so if that is the case, and so many journalists feel like this, especially investigative journalists, why aren't we talking about it?
Well, that's a very good question, and one very brave reporter, Cheryl Atkinson, recently sat down with Larry King and spoke about this and what she thinks may have been at the root of this, because she's an investigative journalist that has covered the Benghazi crisis and many others. She reports that the government was spying and hacking into not only her work computer, but her home computer. Listen to what she has to say about the state of our media on Larry King.
But a general cultural change that's occurred, whereby we are too often going along with powers that be, whether they're corporate interests or political interests or other special interests. We're too swayed by the propaganda campaigns, by the social media, by the pushback, and there's much less appetite to get out there and do great original and investigative journalism.
So essentially what she's saying is that media bosses are not pushing their journalists to go out there and be journalists and push against the political agendas of our leaders. Now, one key thing about her coverage, now she was doing a story on the Benghazi debacle, and she was specifically needling the Obama administration for dropping the ball on that. And she was told by experts that due to her coverage of that, it was most likely that her correspondence was being hacked into. She had an expert look at her home computer, her work computer, and it was found that the software being used to spy on her, according to what she says, was software that's used by 4 different federal agencies for those purposes. And a really chilling part of this, her sources, many of her secret sources, did not come from political adversaries of the Obama administration. They came from inside the Obama administration itself. They came from inside the Obama administration itself.
Well, most people are familiar with the plot of the Tom Cruise movie Minority Report, a concept of pre-crime being used to prevent crimes before they happen. Well, there's a new software system attempting to do something very much like that by forecasting the highest risk times and places for future crimes.
Algorithm is another way of saying instruction, but that's kind of like saying the Bible is a book or John Barrowman is an actor. It's incomplete. Result algorithms like Amazon's or Google's PageRank, newsfeed algorithms like the one Facebook uses, they work really hard to show you things that they think you're gonna wanna see. They cater to your interests, which means you could become isolated from things the computer brain thinks you're not interested in.
It's a very robust, powerful, cloud-hosted, secure solution that quickly accesses a myriad of commercial data sources, public data sources, and presents a threat assessment during the short window of an emergency response. So typically a subset of 911 calls are very high risk. We bring high value data to the target addresses where the responders are going and present a threat score in a color-coded format, and then the officers can drill down if there is a red or yellow threat to get increasingly greater levels of detail.
Access through any browser, fixed or mobile, on any internet-enabled device, including tablets, smartphones, laptop, and desktop computers. Beware, that's the name of the program from Intrado. Searches, sorts, and scores billions, with a B, billions of commercial records in a matter of seconds, alerting responders to potentially deadly and dangerous situations while en route to or at the location of a call. What's unique and stood out to me is that the technology is actually scanning, it says, commercial, criminal, and social media information, as well as any, quote, comments that could be construed as offensive in order to be able to determine a threat score. And then each suspect, I guess if you want to call them that police are responding to, is assessed through this technology a threat score on different levels, green, yellow, and red, based on comments they've made. Now, is that a slippery slope because obviously the algorithm doesn't have the ability to judge intent of content or comments. Rather, it has the ability to merely gather these words and then assign a threat level. Is there an issue there? It's telling you not just that a crime could exist, but it's actually telling you who's going to commit that crime.
That is correct. It's trying to forecast based on maybe your past behavior or what is seen in your social media, and that change your behavior, changing the things you're posting about, and then they say maybe this person is going to perpetrate a crime in the future, and then they want prevention from the police officer.
Young man John Crawford, who had the BB gun inside of a Walmart and was shot to death inside that Walmart. Officers responded based on information given to them by a 911 caller who said there may be someone walking around with a weapon, and it was based on just that little bit of information that they made a very, very poor decision. Do you foresee lawsuits in the future over this kind of technology, of people saying you're allowing basically a computer to tell you that this person is a criminal?
Like any other tool, doesn't know or care if it's being used to do good or run the Death Star. The power is in the possibly black leather gloved hands of the people using the tech.
What we provide is the baseline information in a very short time window. So if an agency's getting 50,000 911 calls a month, typically there's a percentage of them, could be 5 to 10%, that are judged to be high-risk calls, shots fired, domestic disturbance, etc. So that's the type of 911 call that a beware threat alert might be instigated for. And then if there is a threat that's captured, that would then be published through, in this case, the integrated data portal.
Now, if I were to do this by hand as a human being, this would take me days. How long does it take Beware to make this assessment and give me that red, green, and yellow indicator that I can use?
Our target response window is less than 60 seconds.
In the last year.
So there's nothing you can do private on your cell phones. There's nothing private you can do on your streets. We should tell our viewers that now the latest push is by law enforcement to be able to surveil people in their vehicles. So stay tuned for the next. We are out of time, Andrew.
Encrypt everything.
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
You go.
Another reason to be careful of what you share on Facebook. The feds could be checking you out. According to a Justice Department document, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are using Facebook, Twitter, and the like in their investigations. And in some cases, agents are using false identities to communicate online with suspects or browse their personal information. A civil liberties group which obtained the document is suing the federal government to try to force it to disclose its exact policies for social networking.
Take a backseat to no one in my commitment to network neutrality. Because once providers start to privilege some applications or websites over others, then the smaller voices get squeezed out and we all lose. The internet is perhaps the most open network in history, and we have to keep it that way.
The story concerned another NSA program called PRISM. Documents showed how, beginning in 2007, 9 internet companies were cooperating with the NSA. Gelman wanted to make sure his reporting wouldn't damage national security.
We very much did want to know what they thought would do concrete harm and how and why. And the U.S. government asked me not to publish the names of the 9 companies that were supplying information to the government in the PRISM program. And I said, why? Their argument was that if we published the names, then the companies would be less inclined to cooperate. And I guess we agreed to disagree on that one.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take one question. I don't want the whole day to just be a bleeding press conference, but I'm going to take Jackie Combs' question.
Mr. President, could you please react to the reports of secret government surveillance of phones and internets? And can you also assure Americans that the government, your government, doesn't have some massive secret database of all their personal online information and activities?
Yeah. What the intelligence community is doing is looking at phone numbers and durations of calls. They are not looking at people's names, and they're not looking at content.
The president tried to downplay the revelations.
Now, with respect to the internet and emails, this does not apply to U.S. citizens, and it does not apply to people living in the United States. In the abstract, you can complain about Big Brother and how this is a potential program run amok. I believe we need a new approach. I am therefore ordering a transition that will end the Section 215 bulk metadata program as it currently exists and establish a mechanism that preserves the capabilities we need without the government holding this bulk metadata.
Learned about a new program, the Washington Post reporting that the Obama administration also has a program called PRISM. And I'm going to leave it to Steve Hayes to explain what PRISM is. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, PRISM appears to be, according to the Washington Post story, which I think is a fascinating read, appears to be a program that taps into 9 internet providers.
Extracting audio, video, photographs, emails, documents, and collection logs. Now, it does
the content. They can look for terrorists, presumably, by assessing content and seeing patterns in content.
You have to go to a judge. B, you do it's sifted by a computer looking for patterns. It's data mining. If it finds a pattern, it has to go see a judge again and look into it individually. And that, I think, is reasonable.
The reality is, if you're on the internet, you literally might as well be on the front page of the Globe and Mail. It is very accessible by anybody that has any inclination to want to access it.
Hi, everybody. Ever since the internet was created, it's been organized around basic principles of openness, fairness, and freedom. There are no gatekeepers deciding which sites you get to access. There are no toll roads on the information superhighway. This set of principles, the idea of net neutrality, has unleashed the power of the internet and given innovators the chance to thrive. Abandoning these principles would threaten to end the internet as we know it. That's why I'm laying out a plan to keep the internet free and open. And that's why I'm urging the Federal Communications Commission to do everything they can to protect net neutrality for everyone. They should make it clear that whether you use a computer, phone, or tablet, internet providers have a legal obligation not to block or limit your access to a website. Cable companies can't decide which online stores you can shop at or which streaming services you can use. And they can't let any company pay for priority over its competitors. To put these protections in place, I'm asking the FCC to reclassify internet service under Title II of a law known as the Telecommunications Act. In plain English, I'm asking them to recognize that for most Americans, the internet has become an essential part of everyday communication and everyday life. The FCC is an independent agency, and ultimately this decision is theirs alone. But the public has already commented nearly 4 million times, asking the FCC to make sure that consumers, not the cable company, gets to decide which sites they use.
Today, the Obama administration, which has already nationalized health care, the auto industry, insurance companies, banks, and student loans, will move forward with what could be the first step in controlling how Americans use the internet.
There was a time when governments tried to be hush-hush about their surveillance capabilities and plans, sensing that many people would be unwilling to sacrifice their privacy in the name of security, but not anymore.
While on a tour of the Department of Homeland Security, US President Barack Obama has unveiled proposals to strengthen cybersecurity laws after recent hacking attacks against Sony Pictures and the federal government itself.
Just yesterday, we saw the hack of a military Twitter account and YouTube channel. No military operations were impacted, and it's a reminder that cyber threats are an urgent and growing danger.
Communications Commission, or FCC, just voting in favor of regulating the internet. The controversial decision only passed the panel by a 3-2 vote.
Net neutrality is the principle that all online traffic should be treated equally. This means that if you pay for a certain speed of internet connection, you should be able to use all of that speed all of the time, regardless of which site or service you're using. This idea is important to make sure that you get your downloads quickly, you're able to watch online video like Netflix or YouTube without any problems, you can play games without being affected by lag, and you can load your favorite websites without companies alike for what they call a fast lane. What that really means, though, is that they'll be able to slow down a user or company's connection if they don't pay up. Make no mistake, the internet will not get faster with these so-called fast lanes. Websites in the fast lane will trundle along at the same speed they always did, and everything else will be dumped into a slow lane. It's like saying, well, the speed limit right now for cars is 70 miles per hour, but if you pay for this fast lane, you can drive in it at 70 miles per hour. But everybody else has to drive in the slow lane at 30 miles per hour. You didn't make anyone faster by doing that, you just slowed down the people who weren't willing to pay you extra money for the services they should be getting anyway. The end result of abolishing net neutrality is that the quality of your service could degrade and your internet bill could rise. If huge companies like Time Warner and Comcast had their way, they would have the ability to charge you extra every month to watch Netflix or use Facebook, on top of many already trying to impose bandwidth caps on how much data you can download every month. This would be like a water company charging you extra because you decided to use your water for coffee instead of the laundry. The water company doesn't have any right to dictate what you use your water for, they can only charge you for the water itself. An electricity company doesn't charge you for premium electricity for your television, they can just charge you for the electricity that you use. Not companies like Comcast and Time Warner also sell television services, and television viewership has been declining year on year due to competition from services like Netflix and Amazon Instant Video. These internet service providers have a vested interest in slowing down their competition. If they succeed in abolishing net neutrality, they will be given power over the internet itself and gain the position of kingmaker. They get to decide what you watch, they get to decide which companies succeed, and all the while perpetrating a massive conflict of interest by also providing their own content. In the worst case scenario, a site could be slowed down so much that it would prevent users from even accessing it, effectively censoring the content. This is contrary to freedom of speech and the ideal of a free and open internet that encourages technological innovation, a strong economy, and healthy competition. That's what net neutrality is, and that's why it's important.
Now, again, if you don't know much about net neutrality, it's very important because what the internet providers want to be able to do is to say, look, I put the pipes in, I get to control the pipes. So there'll be a fast lane and a slow lane. The fast lane will be what you have today. It won't be any faster, okay? But the real problem is the slow lane. That's where I'm going to put people who don't pay my ransom, right? And who might be my competitors. And people I disagree with politically. They all get slowed down. All of a sudden you can't access their websites, their streaming services, whatever it happens to be. It gives them tremendous power over the internet.
I'm curious to know if you support net neutrality and how you feel about the court's decision and how that decision will impact the U.S. economy and the internet as we currently know it.
Well, first of all, let me just say that's a nice Marley poster you got behind you. You know, it's something that I've cared deeply about ever since I ran for office. In part because my own campaign was empowered by a free and open internet and the ability for citizens all across this country to engage and create and find new ways and new tools to mobilize themselves A lot of that couldn't have been done if there were a bunch of commercial barriers and roadblocks. And so I've been a strong supporter of net neutrality.
Last May, President Obama named Tom Wheeler to be FCC chairman. Mr. Wheeler had been one of Obama's top bundlers of campaign cash, both in 2008 and again in 2012 when he raised at least $500,000 for the president's reelection. Wheeler had been top gun for both the cable and wireless industries, and however we might try to imagine that he could quickly abandon old habits of service to his employers, that's simply not how Washington works. Daniel Alvarez was a longtime member of a law firm that has advised Comcast. He once wrote to the FCC on behalf of Comcast, arguing against net neutrality rules. He's been hired by Tom Wheeler. Philip Verveer also worked for Comcast and the Wireless and Cable Trade Associations. He's now Tom Wheeler's senior counselor. Attorney Brendan Carr worked for Verizon and the Telecom Industries Trade Association, which lobbied against net neutrality. Now, Brendan Carr is an advisor to FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai, who used to be a top lawyer for Verizon.
Story change this morning for how everyone uses his internet. For the first time, the web will be regulated much like landline telephone service. Regulators approved net neutrality yesterday. The rules are designed to make sure internet companies treat all content providers equally without charging more for faster service.
Hey, whistleblower Ed Snowden is on the run. We're learning this morning he never got on that Aeroflot flight. He bought that seat, but it went empty to Havana. And right now, the foreign minister of Ecuador is speaking out. He says his country will put human rights principles above any other interest in allowing Snowden to hide in Ecuador, if such is the case. So if Snowden were a true patriot, wouldn't he be standing up for himself?
The U.S. Army confirms he had enlisted in the Army Reserve back in 2004, and that the military discharged him nearly 4 months later. Snowden told The Guardian that was after he broke both of his legs during training, ending his hopes of fighting in Iraq. He said he eventually got jobs at the CIA and the National Security Agency, putting his computer skills to work despite reportedly having no high school diploma and failing to complete coursework at a Maryland community college. More recently, Snowden said he worked at an NSA office in Hawaii for the defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton. But he told the Washington Post he felt compelled to reveal the surveillance state that he discovered at the NSA, knowing that this could upset his, quote, very comfortable life. A life he said included supportive family, many of whom work in the government, plus his $200,000 a year salary and the home he shared with his girlfriend.
Well, he's not a patriot, and he's not
he thinks he is because he's exposing...
And he's not a whistleblower. He's a fugitive. He's arguably a traitor. He's been charged with a criminal complaint under the Espionage Act. And now, in my view, he's giving aid and comfort to China, to Russia, to Cuba.
I think the revelations are terrible because they were revealed. There are reasons why we have classified programs.
So you think the program is good, the revealing was bad?
Exactly. No, all this.
Who you're talking to?
The fact of the matter, of course, is out there that all of these days who are using the internet, our credit cards and so forth, Visa probably knows more about us in terms of our lifestyle and our habits and our likes and dislikes than the NSA ever will.
Contractor Edward Snowden told NBC News today his son is not a traitor. Lonnie Snowden also told Attorney General Eric Holder he believes his son would voluntarily return to the U.S. to face espionage charges if the Justice Department promises not to hold him before trial or subject him to a gag order. The Washington Post also reported that following the attacks of September 11th, the National Security Agency cultivated relationships with phone companies and internet providers to obtain domestic records.
Like him, to me he looks like a grandstander. I'm watching him, he's been there for 3 months, and I didn't like him. A lot of information that people are getting, and that our government is getting, and you say, really, where does it stop? So it's a mess, there's no question about it. And yet, when you're just going into everybody's records and you can go into an enemy's records that has nothing to do about terrorism if you happen to be in government, you really say, where does it stop?
Right. Michael Hayden explained it is that, you know, for example, you get someone on a Xeristan and you go through his pockets and you find a bunch of phone numbers there, you plug them in and a bunch of things light up because you're able to store this stuff and you're able to get direct lines of passage because we have the unique ability since we created the internet, thanks to Al Gore, to keep all the major servers in this country. So we're using that asset to our advantage.
Well, you know, I see it, and I see it in trials. Every time you have a trial, they used to ask for, like, a witness. Now all they ask for is emails. Everything's about emails. And, you know...
Being a patriot doesn't mean prioritizing service to government above all else. Being a patriot means knowing when to protect your country, knowing when to protect your Constitution, knowing when to protect your countrymen from the violations of and encroachments of adversaries. And those adversaries don't have to be foreign countries.
I do think that when history looks at this, they're going to contrast the behavior of James Clapper, our National Intelligence Director, with Edward Snowden. Mr. Clapper lied in Congress in defiance of the law in the name of security. Mr. Snowden told the truth in the name of privacy.
Well, it's hard to talk about the lasting effects of WikiLeaks without also talking about Private First Class Bradley Manning. Manning is accused of leaking many of those classified cables to WikiLeaks. Now, even though he was arrested 2.5 years ago, Manning is just now having his pre-trial hearing, despite a law in the military that says court-martial should come within 120 days of being detained. Now, at first, Manning was held for about 3 months in Kuwait, then transferred in July 2010 to the Marine Corps base at Quantico in Virginia, where he remained for 8 months, reportedly spending all of that time in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, forced to strip naked at night. He was then moved to Fort Leavenworth, or maybe I have that backwards. Regardless, his pretrial hearing has been taking place under intense secrecy, with activists and journalists fighting to get more access.
This week, the hearings that we're having this week are really important because they are going to focus on what Bradley experienced while he was at Quantico in Northern Virginia. So that's where he was kept around 8 or 9 months, and that's where, for upwards of 23 hours a day, they took away his clothes, they made him sit in a 6-foot by 8-foot room, and subjected him to conditions that the UN said were pretty much on par with torture. So,
if our government is doing something wrong and they're hiding it from us, I think there's a moral obligation of those people who know it and can reveal that to us to let us know. They should tell us. But the government complains, oh no, they're going to release this information to the enemy. Well, I'm not the enemy. The people's not the enemy. The people ought to know what's going on. We ought to have our privacies protected and the secrecy of government challenged when it's totally unnecessary. And most of this is very unnecessary, all the spying that they do.
Well, I just think it's a sad day in the country when a fellow citizen, my dear brother Bradley Manning, reveals lies and crimes of the U.S. government. He's the one who's criminalized. And for me, one day's too much.
The government had the opportunity when Private Manning pled guilty to improperly disclosing classified information. I mean, he stood up and took accountability for what he did wrong, which subjected him to a 20-year sentence. And the government, rather than just accepting his guilty plea and what would have been an appropriate punishment, insisted on going forward with the aiding the enemy charge, similar to treason. The government lost on that, and all they've done is bought 5 years of appeals from here on out. And I think Private Manning has some really good grounds for appeal, but again, it's to send a message to the next person sitting out there. And I haven't heard anyone in the military saying, gee, I wish I was Private Manning. I think folks that have seen what he's been through don't want to be the next Private Manning, and they're going to think twice about revealing classified.
Taking that counterterrorism, or CT, and counterinsurgency coin operations, we became obsessed with capturing and killing human targets on lists, and on being suspicious of and avoiding cooperation with our host nation partners, and ignoring the second and third order effects of accomplishing short-term goals and missions. I believe that if the general public, especially the American public, had access to the information contained within the Sidney Ides and EA tables, this could spark a domestic debate on the role of the military and our foreign policy in general, as well as related to Iraq and Afghanistan. I also believe the detailed analysis of the data over a long period of time by different sectors of society might cause society to reevaluate the need or even the desire to engage in counterterrorism and counterinsurgency operations that ignore the complex dynamics of the people living in the affected environment every day.
So his real intent was to have the American people find out what their government was doing, so they could have a debate about it, so they could be informed enough to have a realistic conversation about what we're doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, that would be the textbook definition of a whistleblower.
Now, 27 February 2010, a report was received from a subordinate battalion. The report described an event in which the federal police obtained, or FP, detained 15 individuals for printing anti-Iraqi literature. Over the course of my research, I found that none of the individuals had previous ties with anti-Iraqi actions or suspected terrorist or militia groups. A few hours later, I received several photos from the scene from the subordinate battalion. I printed a blown-up copy of the high-resolution photo and laminated it for ease of use and transfer. I then walked to the top and delivered the laminated copy to our Category 2 interpreter, who said the general nature of the document was benign. The documentation, as I assessed as well, was merely a scholarly critique of the then current Iraqi Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki.
To give you a sense of what he's talking about, the specifics, so they translate the material, this is the stuff that's supposed to be anti-Iraqi insurgents, and they realize it's just guys who are arguing against Maliki, the current prime minister, and in fact, it's a highly intellectual argument against him. It lists his corruption, and it lists the financial impact of his corruption on the Iraqi people, exactly what you should have in a democracy. So then, Bradley Manning, having done his job, doing intelligence on that, brings it to his superiors, and listen to what happens next.
It detailed corruption within the cabinet of al-Maliki's government and the financial impact of this corruption on the Iraqi people. After discovering this discrepancy between the federal police's report and the interpreter's transcript, I forwarded this discovery to the top OIC and battle NCOIC. The top OIC, overhearing battle captain, informed me that they didn't want, or that they didn't need or want to know this information anymore. They told me to, quote, drop it, unquote, and to just assist them and the federal police in finding out where more of these print shops reading, quote, anti-Iraqi literature, unquote, might be. I couldn't believe what I heard, and I returned to the T-skip and complained to the other analysts in my section NCOIC about what happened. Some were sympathetic, but no one wanted to do anything about it.
What would you do? Did you understand what he's saying there? They find out that these are perfectly legitimate political opponents of Maliki, goes to the superiors and they say, just drop it. Now, do you understand what happens to these guys when, and drop it doesn't mean we're dropping the case. Drop your whole, nonsense about what it actually says. We don't give a damn what it actually says. We're going to go round those guys up. When they round them up, they hand them over to the Iraqi police, where they most likely will get tortured and might never be released. They might even be killed. So what would you do? Would you just say, oh, okay, great, here, well, terrific. Here's the names of the anti-Iraqi people. Go ahead and torture or possibly even execute them. Now, if you're a person of conscience, you might also think about, hey, maybe I should leak this so that I could prevent that from happening. In fact, that's exactly what Bradley Manning thought. Watch.
I knew that if I continued to assist Baghdad federal police in identifying the political opponents of Prime Minister al-Maliki, those people would be arrested and in the custody of the special unit of the Baghdad federal police, very likely tortured and not seen again for a very long time, if ever. I decided to take the information and dispose it to the WLO in the hope that before the upcoming 7 March 2010 election, they could generate some immediate press on the issue and prevent this unit of the federal police from continuing to crack down on political opponents of al-Maliki.
Now, the one thing Bradley Manning was consistently wrong on is he thought if I release this information, it might have an impact. Of course, our politician and our government doesn't care about what reality is at all. They're the same guys who told him to drop it. So even if after we found out all these things, what happened? They continued to send the political opponents of Maliki to get tortured and to get imprisoned, etc. We continued the war in Iraq. We certainly continued the war in Afghanistan for years and years. We're still in the middle of that war in Afghanistan. We didn't change any of our policies, and we continue to use drone strikes now, which is, different than the Apache helicopter, but an expansion of the overall idea of hitting first responders. We do double taps with those drone strikes. So unfortunately, Bradley Manning had the right intent, but it didn't work because nobody gave a damn when he gave that information. Now we give a damn, and a lot of you out there care about it and understand that's why Bradley Manning's a whistleblower and in a lot of ways a hero. But of course the government doesn't see it that way, and they're hoping to put him in prison for decades and maybe his entire life. Now you know what I think. I think we need to free Bradley Manning.
Instead of a forensic psychiatrist to assess Manning's mental health while he was stationed at Quantico, initially the officers there relied on a dentist.
Let me tell you this, if I were the President of the United States, I would pardon Bradley Manning and I would pardon Snowden immediately.
What do you think of the Bradley Mannings and the Edward Snowdens?
Well, I think highly of them. I think of them like Daniel Ellsberg. Daniel Ellsberg, you know, was they tried to put him away for a long time in prison. They tried the New York Times for releasing the truth about how the Vietnam War was started, how we were lied into that war. And I think people now are trying to tell us the truth about what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. They should be seen more as heroes, because you take a guy like Snowden, he knows exactly what he was up to, and he knows the danger of it. And but he believed, I sincerely believe, although I've never met him, that he was convinced that he was doing a service to the people by doing this, and we shouldn't be calling people like this a traitor.
You think Snowden is a patriot or a traitor, whether or not you think he broke the law, whether or not you think he deserves asylum or prison. Here's the bottom line. None of this changes the content of the leaks. And that's what this is all about.
Meanwhile, another whistleblower, Bill Binney, a 36-year intelligence agency veteran, has received the 2015 Sam Adams Award for Integrity. Binney is a former NSA technical director who resigned from his post back in 2001 when he discovered that a program that he helped develop was actually being used to spy on Americans. Check out what Bill had to say.
Actually, it's quite an honor to be recognized by such a group of individuals who basically, at one time or another, potentially sacrificed everything in their lives to try to bring truth to the public. Well, I'm pretty sure that I, as well as other whistleblowers, have made a difference. At least people are becoming more and more aware in our country, and certainly Congress is trying to start to do some things very slowly, moving in the direction of correcting these things. It's hard to understand why people in elected office who go in with an oath of office to defend and protect the Constitution, how they could violate that. My new job is to make my government honest and make them face the truth publicly.